13 years ago, Assassin's Creed Black Flag recreated the key people, places and events of the golden age of piracy. Now, we get to re-experience life on the high seas in even more detail with Black Flag Resynced, a bold rebuilding of the game from the ground up. Today I'm joined by the game's narrative director, Janisse, and level design director, Julien Koch. I'll ask them how the developers used the latest technology to breathe new life into Black Flag's world of pirates, how they enriched the game with new historical details, and ask what were the biggest challenges of revisiting a fan favourite game. A very warm welcome to Echoes of History, Joel and Julien. It's great to have you with us.
Hi, man.
I wonder if we could start off with just a little introduce yourselves. So, Joel, what's your role on Resynced?
Well, I'm the narrative director of Resynced, so that means I'm more or less in charge of any narrative content changes, overall tone, just the overall narrative of the remake of the experience.
Excellent. And Julien, what were you working on this project?
Hello, so I'm a level design director. I'm in charge of assembling all of the gameplay brick together and working also with all of our artists, quest designer, writer to basically building the world, getting all of the ambience, feel correct as well.
Perfect. And Assassin's Creed Black Flag it's jam-packed with real history. So we can meet Blackbeard and Annie Bonny. We can go to real places from the golden age of piracy like Nassau in the Pirate Republic. Obviously, there must have been a huge amount of research and concept art that was done for the original game. So I guess, Joel, to start off with, when you're making Resynced, did you just kind of dust all of that off? Or was there a new, fresh set of research that you had to undertake as well?
I mean, it's a bit of both. So we definitely did dust that stuff off and go back to the original kind of vision of the original game, as well as go back to the historical references of the time. And so, one of the main books, at least on the narrative side, that we would go to was a general history of pirates, which was kind of a story about the pirates and many of the characters that you meet in our game that was written more or less contemporaneously with when they were around. And so it's kind of it's a really nice snapshot into the world and how things were thought about and how things were discussed regarding pirates at that time, rather than us looking back. And so that was always like a really nice one. But yeah, in addition to that, we did look at all the original sort of documentation and all the original concept art from the original game. And, in some sense, you could argue that we almost have two histories that we're dealing with when making Resynced. We're looking at the history of the golden age of piracy in the Caribbean at the time. But we're also looking at kind of the history of the original game and what the original game really laid the foundation for and what the kind of approach was then for us to kind of piggyback onto.
The General Book of Pirates must have been a fantastic source for you guys because it's such a kind of salacious, gossipy version that gives you loads of backstories about pirates. And maybe we don't know that it's 100% true, but what it does do is, as you were saying, Joel, it kind of gives us a window into the contemporary view of pirates, even if it's not 100% accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even just that too. It's like the language of how they spoke about piracy at the time and the emphasis of what they thought was important about piracy versus what maybe we think now, looking back so many hundreds of years later. And so, yeah, it has all those levels. And, one other interesting thing about that book is that the writer of the book is not really known. Is it even a single writer? There is an attributed name, but we're not 100% sure that name, we're pretty sure that name is not actually the real name of the writer, but nevertheless, the fact that even the sort of source itself is a little bit shadowy and a little bit mysterious adds a little bit of a extra layer of intrigue about that material. And I think it plays into the whole intrigue that people at the time had about piracy and that people still have.
Julien, was this an opportunity to include some history or some elements, some visuals that you didn't have in the original game that you perhaps had to skip over or leave out? Was this an opportunity to go back and kind of pick things that you wanted to make sure made it in this time?
Yeah, totally. That's something we were able to push a lot of details. Like you talk about all the concept art, you talk about all the documentation. We were able to look at them again and like, hey, like the streets were a bit more empty at the time. Like we had so much opportunity to add more detail in the street, like small objects of their time. Food was a big thing as well. People discussing in the street. When we push all of this detail, we look at it, we forgot this one, or now we can do this. On the ships as well, we have a lot of people that are very enthusiastic about all the detail, the shape of the sail, like, this rope was missing. So having like this new engine allows us to push all of this further. Like we didn't change the big picture, but we went way more zooming in, stuff we couldn't show, like the poster on the wall or the labels on bottle. It was all kind of blurry at the time. Now we can add a lot more detail, a lot more stories, sometimes a bit more like quirky things. Overall, it gives a lot of life, and it helped getting more into detail on this feeling of what was Havana, what was Kingston, what was Nassau.
And is that being able to give that extra layer of detail, is that fun? Is that good? Or is that a challenge? Does that make your life much more difficult?
I think a bit of both, but as we said, like the same way with the story of Pirate, like we are not entirely accurate. What we are going for is to get this feelings, this what would you have felt the first time you go to Havana after spending like 2 months at sea on a small claustrophobic boat. Suddenly you arrive in this giant city full of life, full of color, full of odors, like all of the things you must have felt. That's what we are trying to give you, rather than a really perfect vision of what it was in 1715. We are going for, what's the sailor, how they would have been eye-opened by seeing all of this. And so we do take a bit of freedom, and all of these choices are quite deliberate. And most of the time it's more fun because we know, like, even if something is a bit off, it goes into this story we try to tell.
Yeah, and something I would just add to Julien's point is how much we take for granted how often we have answers at our fingertips about the world, about history, about what's going on, and how the characters in this world were so often, especially the ones from Europe coming to the Caribbean, were coming to a place that was a total mystery to them. You know, when they would have arrived, they would have known nothing really about what they were stepping into, and so had to be the kind of people who were really adventurers and who could think on their feet and kind of adapt to what they were coming across day to day. And so in some ways there is an extra challenge there to try and bring the world and bring the characters of the world back to that mindset when it seems very different from how we live day to day today.
But also I'd imagine a great opportunity, because if the history can only give you 75%, then you've got 25% kind of to play with.
Yeah, and I think that's always one of the great strengths of the brand of Assassin's Creed is like there is a bit of a roadmap in terms of the history, but there's always cracks, and there's actually disagreements in the historical record, and there's actually there's holes where, like, well, what could have happened in this hole that exists in the historical record that we don't quite fully understand even to this day. And so for us as like storytellers and artists, those are always the things to look at and to imagine what it could be, and to often try to imagine through the lens of our own brand and our own stories that we are trying to tell.
Yeah. I think that's something you touched in one of your previous video on the original game, like where all of these pirates actually in Nassau at this time? Maybe not, but isn't it cool to imagine what happened if like Charles Vane meets this one other character and all? Like we can play with what we know of this character, what they did, what's all of the great things they did, and terrible as well. And then we mix it together. We have Edward in the middle, and that really gives us a great story that is still anchored into facts, but that is still our own. Yes.
When the original game came out in 2013, it was obviously built within the limitations of the technology of 2013. You're rebuilding it with much more freedom, much more scope, much more ability, much more depth in the game engines. I mean, original Black Flag gave us, I think, 50 major locations and 75 islands that you could explore. Was there a temptation to really go wild with this, to explode the world and make so much more in the story? And how do you resist that temptation?
Thanks to our producer that is constantly behind us. No, that's there was a brief temptation, but it was quite dispelled quite early. We could have made all of the island explorable, like going in every jungle, but that's not a story we want to tell. That's not who Edward is. He's a pirate first and foremost. It's already quite a lot to bring everything together. To not go too technical, the world was not one on the first one. It was really fragmented between some world. Just bringing everything together, it's really refreshed the experience. Like it's way more seamless, and it was already quite a challenge, and it felt right.
There's a sense of pacing that you don't want to lose, like there's a sense of the player. We want the player to have maximum exploration and be able to have even more depth to that exploration, but we also want them to kind of move through the content at a certain rhythm and get the story at a certain pace, which was already very well done in the original game. And so we really want to highlight that and emphasize that rather than take away from it.
He does explore some location, but there is reason why he goes into some of the jungle, why he look for some Mayan temple and some Mayan ruins. So we decided really to be faithful. We do give some new location for you to play with, but the overall Caribbean is the same.
If anything felt like it shouldn't be part of the original game or wouldn't be part of the original game, if there was something about it that really precluded its addition, we probably would choose not to add it. Anything along the main path to me is almost like sacred. Like we want that original story that the player remembers to still hit the way they remembered it hitting. And so even if there is micro adjustments, we really wanted those adjustments to sort of smoothly integrate and feel like they were there from the beginning. And then of course there are like bigger chunks of new content that really aren't part of the main path. And I think it's there where we allow ourselves to play a little bit more and to sort of bring new tones and maybe new ideas to the story.
Were there enough changes and additions and fleshing out of things that you had to go back? Did you have to engage historical consultants again and rethink some of the things that you were going to add into the game?
Yeah, we have a great team of consultants in Paris that help us on some topic. They do know, like one of them, Thierry, is an expert on South America, so that's of great help for this project. But they also help us to connect with other experts and historians. Like we didn't want to change much of how the Mayan are portrayed in the game, but we did introduce like some new iconography that we really wanted to be right. So we got access to one of the experts on this domain, and that was great to correct some of the art we did to look where it can bring more life, tells more story. So they are always our support. We can ask questions. We have a full page full of questions from, like what I said, architecture, but also like food. Like I think there's a chocolate with a
there's a new cutscene that's a flashback between Edward and his wife that they drink kind of liquid chocolate in the scene, and that was actually like a big topic of historical discussion on our side with our experts, because I think our initial idea was actually that it would be hard chocolate that we imagine today, and we realized actually it would be very unlikely that they would have such a thing, and actually chocolate was much more often consumed in this sort of liquid form, and so we had to kind of go back to the scene, think about it more. I think in the end, what we did come up with is even better in the end, but like it definitely became what it is because of our sort of collaboration with our historical experts.
And I hope players, appreciate all of that detail that's going in there, down to the way that you consume a type of food. There's been lots of discussion and debate about how that should be done. It's fantastic. I wondered if, I'm going to ask you first, Joel, and then come to you, Julien. Have you got a favorite historical detail in the game that you would want players to spot?
Yeah, I mean, I really do love the portrayal of a prison or a dungeon in the game, and the location is
Port Royal.
Port Royal, thank you. There's a couple things about it, but just like imagining how horrible it would be to be in a prison type scenario in that time period, and all the things they didn't have that, maybe a modern day prison is almost luxurious by comparison. And in addition to that, there is a brief moment in the game that portrays the fact that someone who is clearly suffering from, I would call, severe mental illness is lumped in the prison, and how that was probably how a mentally ill person in this time period and at this time would have been treated. And unfortunately, maybe some people might say it's unfortunately not that far from how sometimes issues of mental illness are treated in society still today. But in this game and in this time period, I really did like that special attention paid to that particular location and the sort of sociological detail of how the different people are treated who are there.
And I guess we can be grateful you don't have smelly vision in the game yet.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't want to go that far, but there are buckets. I leave it to your imagination to imagine what happens with those.
I would like to point that we do have one big history nerd in the game, and it's Edward himself. At some point, you do acquire a manor that you have the liberty to add a lot of customization to, and all of these objects are actual artifacts. A lot of them are nowadays in a Metropolitan Museum in New York. How did they acquire it from Edward is another question. But I really like that Edward kind of has interest not only in gold, but in history and architecture, art. And I do hope it will inspire people to look into the real objects in the real world. And if that inspires them as well to go to museum, that's also great.
Black Flag Resynced is kind of a ground-up rebuilding of the original game. So we're in a world where we get remasters, so that older games can be played on more modern consoles. We get remakes where they're made in newer game engines and things like that. Why Resynced? Why was that the name that you went for this version of Black Flag?
Well, obviously, fans of the franchise will understand that you synchronize or sometimes desynchronize in the parlance of our franchise. So there was obviously some tie-in there, but I think it goes even further than that. If you consider the context of the original game and the context that Edward's simulation in the golden age of piracy, it sits in a wider context at that time. And actually, as a brand, the brand now of Assassin's Creed has sort of moved on and the context has shifted. And so we're actually sitting the simulation of the golden age of piracy playing as Edward Kenway in the Animus. So now I'm talking in terms of the lore of the game. That context is refreshed in Black Flag Resynced. And so there are new riffs in the game that kind of pay some lip service to this, as well as other things that the player can find throughout the world. But really being resynced, really, we're really playing with this idea that it is a remake in terms of as a product, so to speak, and as we all as video game fans talk about, but it's also something more, even in the lore of Assassin's Creed, than just seeing the old game again. And so that's why we wanted to name it that.
If you go even a bit further, like again, you are not replaying the same game. You are going back into Edward's memory, and it's super interesting because you are not time traveling. You are experiencing the memory of your ancestor through a machine. Later, it's not even your ancestor. You become like a user through Abstergo, all of our laws. That is really nice. But it raised a lot of question on the fact like history, you are not living it. You are getting them through history and through researches. But they were never completely neutral, or sometimes there were some patrons that were having some political agenda. And it's especially relevant today as a lot of people experience history through AI. Like, can you trust a machine that delivers history to you? And that's part of something we are pushing without spoiler. It raised a lot of interesting questions, and Resynced highlights this, and I hope it will trigger some interest for people to dig a bit into, to dig more into our modern day storyline.
That's such a fascinating aspect of it for people in the history world. AI is a huge challenge because there's so much making its way onto social media now. Some of it clearly AI, some of it less clearly AI, and it is about kind of questioning everything that you see, which I guess really leans into the Assassin's Creed world, doesn't it? To what extent should you question all of the things that are in front of you? Because as you say, a machine has put it there for you to see it.
That's right. And you can also make the argument that even what you do see of Edward's life in the simulation is a window. It's not everything. And so this is how, even in the case of Resynced, you're going to see some more that you didn't see the first time. And that doesn't mean that it wasn't there the first time. It's just, it's more data, it's more to be experienced, and it's more simulation than there originally was.
One of the things that I wanted to ask was around how you kind of balance your varying priorities, from the narrative point of view and the level build and all of that kind of thing. Because there must be temptations for the narrative to run off in a direction, or for the level to add so much detail that the narrative doesn't need. Is there kind of this constant, I don't want to say tension, because you guys obviously clearly get on, but is there this sort of push and pull? How closely are you working together to make sure the world has enough for your narrative and the narrative has enough for the world, but not too much for either?
I think it's quite natural, honestly. Like, once we've been working together for a long time. We've made multiple games together, along with the other directors on our team. You just start to find a rhythm as a team, and you find your patterns that you all have agreed to, and you just kind of stick to that. And if there really is any tension, it's about pointing it out early, honestly, and getting to the bottom of what the real issue is. And it's one of our strengths, honestly, on our team here in Singapore, is that there's not too much ego about that kind of thing. And so we're quite happy to open up any topic and discuss them together as a core team, and really get to the bottom of it to make sure that we are sticking to the high level creative direction that we're following.
Yeah, we are very lucky to have worked together for such a long time. Some of us since actually Black Flag, and Joel for nearly a decade now. So we have this trust. We are able to say the things that need to be said. He's a yes and sometimes no's. We need some no's sometimes. Mm-hmm. And yes, that's one of the strengths of this team.
And is there this constant need as well to balance the need to be true to the history as you can, with fun elements of gameplay? Because there must be so much more that you can do now that you couldn't do in 2013. Do you find yourself sometimes having to check and say, hang on, this doesn't fit the history that we need to stick to, but it would be great if we could do it?
I know there will be some disappointment, especially amongst our vexillology friends. The flag are still partially incorrect. I know it. We knew it years back. Same for the uniform. There was a lot of reality why you had some color access, like why you could use some color for dyes and all. A lot of like, can I mass produce this? Which obviously in a game is just copy paste of all the character. Not like you can create as much as you want. This impacts us in a different way, in what we call affordance, like, and cognitive overload. Like, can I understand if this flag look like that, but this character look like this, and they are part of the same faction? So sometimes we do simplify things for gameplay reasons. So same, the Spanish were not wearing this bright yellow uniform, but it works well with how we depict Havana, how we depict the flag. And yeah, it's not that inaccurate. I think we are 60 years inaccurate, but it fits way more better the aesthetic, the gameplay aesthetic, how it's much easier to understand what's happening on screen, especially sometimes you have like Spanish and British fighting. We couldn't have the British without having the red coat, obviously. There's like such a powerful image. So we do know like there are some shortcuts, but overall they are here to make your experience as a player better. And I do appreciate seeing a lot of people complaining about it, because it make people talk about it. And I think it do inspire, again, people to do more research and sharing something. And I think it's the part that is great with all of our player, all of our fan base that is so passionate. It's all of this discussion around the game that are positive, actually.
Yeah, and I would say just on the narrative side, pretty much whenever you're at sort of an impasse, or if you're hitting a wall in terms of like brainstorming, or we know we need to do something but we're not exactly sure narratively how we're going to do it, typically going back to the history books is a good solution. Like you go back to the history books, you sort of take a look, and then you're like, oh, it's interesting. They did this certain thing this certain way, and okay, maybe actually that would generally inform how this person would behave in this scenario. And then and just that little like momentum of like, oh, if they would behave like that, and now whoop, that thing that narrative problem you're trying to solve just kind of solves itself when you put it into that context. So for us, and that's not just true on Resynced, it's true on many AC games. It's kind of the strength of the brand that, when in doubt, always just take a step back, look back at history. Is there something there that's already going to do for you what you're trying to do, what that you're trying to invent? Rather than invent it, find what was done at the time.
It sounds like one of your checks is almost, we can do this, but the fact that we can doesn't mean that we should.
Yeah.
And you're constantly sort of reminding yourselves that you are sort of restricted a little bit by the history and the desire to get the world so right. So I guess you're fighting this constant temptation to let the technology run away with you and the narrative and the game.
And honestly, it's even more true on this game than on a typical AC game, in the sense that, as I mentioned before, it's almost like there's two histories to respect here. There's the real history of the world, and there's also what was depicted in the original game and how it was depicted, and what was the overall vibe and flavor that the team then was going for, and how do we make sure that we're also true to that. So it's almost like we had two sources to go back to and to cross-reference against each other, and usually we would find our answers from doing that.
Julien, you worked as a level designer on the original Black Flag game. So how different was your role on Resynced, kind of 13 years later?
My role at the time, I was applying the direction for level design. I was creating new location. This part was also fun. It was not the map at the time, so we were trying to find all of the cool things you could do when you were exploring the world at sea. Like Singapore has always been rooted in naval content, but we didn't want naval content to always be I'm on a boat. So we did a lot of cool experimentation. Is it like finding treasure? Is it like boarding a ship during a party? We tried a lot of things, and in the end, the one that worked the best was the smuggler caves. So there are hidden locations around the world where they all have different story, different vibes, but you are exploring some areas that are accessible only by boats, like smuggler boats that sometimes you can follow. And they are still underwater / naval content, so that was cool. And now as a director, I'm making sure the direction is respected. Both like all of this work we did as a level designer 13 years ago, respecting this, but also bringing how do we take what was done with all of the new gameplay we are added. We changed stealth quite a lot. It seems a bit silly, but crouch, like the addition of the crouch move, make you really closer from the location, and you will rethink how you approach all of the locations. So it's a mix of respecting the ancient, including myself, and adding all of these new things that make the game more modern, the new combat as well. A lot of new details. I really love like how the world is more dynamic. One of my achievements on this project is as simple as a flower pot. On the balcony, you have a lot of clutter now, and as you do parkour, which is really iconic to the brand, you have a lot of movement, a lot of things are breaking apart. People are looking at what's happening, and it really reinforces power fantasy of being an assassin. Even if you're first a pirate, you still have a lot of fun on land.
Do you miss kind of working on the levels themselves? Do you miss building those worlds, having that kind of slightly zoomed out view of the whole project?
I still have some opportunities to do a bit of hands-on. I do have one submit on this project. We have a version control. I did fix one thing, but it's not my role anymore. And it's really humbling and inspiring to be working with the next generation of level designer. Some of them have been working since they joined the company, since they joined the industry, and they are amazing. I'm really constantly in awe of how they work, how they think, how they bring new things. Because with a remake, we are quite in a box, but they still manage to to push a bit outside of the box, reinvent, retell story, and rethink my location. And I was sharing it with sharing some of this location also with some people in Montreal. Everyone has the same reaction to see how the work we did 13 years ago was reimagined, reinvented, and like, oh, I didn't think of putting a guard there or opening a way here to go around. It's really, really great and humbling, yes.
Have you got a favorite level, a favorite location that if you could send players to one place and get them to really look at it and say, Julien sent me here, where would you send them?
Yes, it's Anoto Bay. The one who plays the first one will remember it. The one who doesn't know this location, don't worry, nothing bad will happen. Just swim and it will be all good.
Oh, interesting. Everyone's going to have to try that now then. And Joel, so Black Flag Resynced introduces us to some new characters. There's new members of the crew. We've got the Padre, we've got Lucy Baldwin, we've got Tobias Smith. Are those the kind of people that you're able to draw on your historical sources as inspiration for? Do they come from somewhere in the history, or are they simply imagined characters?
Every time we come up with a new character, there's always the question of, are they a historical character or are they a fictional character? So in the case of these three, they are fictional characters, and so usually where a character comes from, honestly, it's always different. But it is true that wherever they might have come from, whatever was the initial inspiration, at some point we come to the moment of, okay, now we have to do our historical due diligence. So one of the cases, like the Padre, we always knew that we wanted him to be sort of this religious, almost quasi-Catholic priest-looking character. But so he didn't come from history fully formed. But what it did do for us is say, well, okay, let's look back and, what is it about the game that we can emphasize, or what is the new story about religion maybe that can be told that wasn't told before? And is this an angle into the history of the golden age of piracy that we could illuminate a little bit more that wasn't illuminated in the original game? And so that's kind of how we tie those characters to history in a way. It's like, Lucy Baldwin sort of comes from a well-to-do family that has a plantation of their own. And obviously Tobias Smith has gone through some very, very heinous story in his life. By the time you meet him, he's covered in scars, and you find him in a very difficult moment for him. And each of these characters are kind of showing a different element of the history in that location, the history of what was it like to be in one of these well-to-do families and then become a pirate? What was it like to be one of these essentially tortured people who were essentially a slave in the case of Tobias Smith? And what was it like to maybe find God in the way that the Padre does, and how does that make sense for a pirate? So each of these things is like taking something from the historical record and then making something specific by putting a specific character on it, working with our historical sort of advisors to really make sure we get that kind of topic right, and then running with it from there. Our creative director, Paul, has pointed out that this idea of having officers on a ship has been around since Assassin's Creed 3, actually. In Assassin's Creed 3, they wanted to do that, but for various constraints in terms of time, budget, whatever, they chose not to. They chose to put their focus elsewhere. And then the topic came up again on the original Black Flag, and once again, they were like, it is a good idea, it's something we would like to do, but given the focus and resources we have right now, we're not going to do that. And so it was just kind of a natural thing that when we did have the chance, we did have more resources, and we did have time to think a little bit more about what Black Flag could be. There was something that was just kind of waiting there on the shelf for us to take and make it a part of this experience.
The game is great at giving us this pirate world, but also avoiding some of the real kind of pitfall cliches about pirates. We don't have talking parrots. We don't have eye patches all over the place. Given that, we talked a little bit about the general book of pirates, gives us this view of what people thought about pirates at the time. Was there any temptation, either from a narrative or from a design point of view, to really lean into those cliches? Because that's what people have as an image of pirates. We think of them hobbling around on a peg leg with an eye patch on and a parrot talking on their shoulder. Was there ever a temptation to lean into that? Was one element wanting it more and one element resisting it?
I mean, having been on the original, and I'm wearing the original dev t-shirt right now that literally said no hook, no parrot. It was really a clear direction on the original to not go into the easy way. The same way like in Valhalla, we avoided the horn on the helmet. We really wanted to position ourselves differently. It doesn't mean there was no hook or there was no like eye patch, because these happened because it was really extremely dangerous to be on a boat with all of the splinter and all. But we didn't want to over-represent it. We really wanted to kind of change the way people perceive pirate and place Black Flag as a new way to depict the Caribbean, depict this piece of history. So yeah, it was very conscious to do like a hard turn away from this. We didn't want this to be everywhere. There are still pirates in the game. We have other pets as well. So we had a lot of choice we can use to tell story that is our own, that respect some part of the fantasy, but also explore other areas that were maybe overshadowed by some other really strong, how to say that?
Cliches, I would say.
Yes, thank you.
You know, Matt, if I would add too, that I'm of the opinion that the original Black Flag really did change the public narrative about this. You know, that idea, the sort of all those pirate cliches that we used to think of, did sort of get replaced a little bit by much more of a deeper understanding about piracy at the time and the golden age of piracy, and a little bit more of a gritty reality of the situation. And I honestly do believe that this game, the original version of this game, changed the narrative in the public consciousness and really moved us away from the parrots and hooks and peg legs and got into a more realistic idea of what piracy was about.
It's a really interesting aspect of the power of what you do, isn't it? Of art and media, that you can alter public perceptions of these kinds of things. You could have lent into those cliches and reinforced them, but you chose to challenge them and reshape them. And that must carry with it a fair bit of responsibility. I don't want to go all Spider-Man and do that with great power comes great responsibility, but it feels a little bit like that, because you are developing and designing people's view of the pirate world in the 21st century.
Yeah, I think that is one of the great strengths of the brand and one of the great strengths of this game. And so, you know, we take that very seriously, and we take that seriously on every Assassin's Creed project, and it's a big responsibility, but it's also incredibly it's incredibly gratifying when you do see that, even if it's a very small thing, someone might really latch onto that and say, wow, that is really accurate to what I know from the history that I've looked into. And that makes me even more bought into this experience and makes me feel even more like they've done their homework, and that this is going to be something that I can feel like I'm stepping into the fantasy of really being in the golden age of piracy.
And you brought Matt Ryan back, who played Edward Kenway in the original game. Obviously, that's 13 years ago. So I guess from one of my practical, technical questions is, when you remake a game like this, is Matt Ryan having to redo his whole performance as Edward Kenway, or are you splicing together the stuff that he originally did with what he did now? You know, has his voice changed enough that you had to redo the whole lot?
So we did not redo all of his original performance. That's the first thing to note. I think, to be honest, the original performances, the casting, the narrative of the original game is so strong that we really did, like, to me, like I said before, it was almost sacred ground, you know, like we didn't really want to mess with anything that was already great. So the idea of redoing all of the original voice was not really something that we considered for very long. So instead, we just wanted to have those same actors back. So Matt Ryan was back, as well as virtually all of the main cast. And whenever we were adding new lines, we were paying special attention in the booth with our voice directing team to understand the how pitches might change over time. Matt himself really did a lot of hard work to make sure that he was matching his original performance as well as he could. There was a lot of time spent in the booth between him and our voice directors to really try to nail that and get it as close as what's reasonable, like doing our best to match those pitches. And in addition to that, the audio team on our side also did a little bit of magic under the hood to bring the different performances together to make sure that it still does sound like one Edward Kenway. But honestly, from the beginning, we knew that even if there was going to be some variation in terms of just like you said, Matt Ryan. It's 13 years later. Everyone starts to sound different over time. We just accepted that.
What was the inspiration to go back and rework Black Flag? How do you decide that Black Flag is a game that is fitting to be resynced?
For us, it really just makes sense with the history of our studio first, and the nature of the game. Like it's games that change the way we do open world at Ubisoft. It made us rethink how we build the different location, how it mixed with the story, and so for us, like getting all of these veterans together and having this really privilege to retread this, but there's a lot of things we remember a bit differently. The street you remember them vibrant, but a lot of things is actually your mind imagining like, oh, I will imagine a barrel there, like, and even like how the character look like. It's always a bit tough. So it's a very tough line to walk, but I think we did a really great job bringing it back to the modern standard, and having retold this story and bringing you back to these locations that now have all of this detail you dreamt about. They are there right now in the game.
Yeah, and I would say on my side too, like I mentioned, this is the first Assassin's Creed game I played back when I was a civilian and didn't work at Ubisoft. And, so it really blew my mind. Like I really loved the game on multiple levels. And I thought the writing was spectacular. I thought the world was spectacular. The performances were amazing. And it was just absolutely a benchmark game for its time. And it also changed my life in a sense, because that's what kind of put me on the path of really looking at this as a brand that as a game developer, I wanted to be a part of and eventually was a part of. And so for me, coming back to it now is kind of this like full circle journey. I think that the pressure is really there because I am also a hardcore Black Flag fan, and as a hardcore Black Flag fan, I would often take the position of what I imagine another hardcore Black Flag fan might, if they were in the room with us when we were making the same kind of calls that we had to make. One thing people will, I hopefully see when they play the game is how much true passion and love there was for Black Flag on the Singapore team who did this remake and this resync of the game. So many of the members of our team and our core team, like Julien, even worked on that original game. And then there was people like me who were just absolutely super fans of the original game and just loved to jump at the chance to be somehow a part of that when making Resynced. And so, yeah, it comes with a lot of pressure, but at the same time, and we really see that pressure in I think the right context, and we kind of go for it anyway and try to do the best we can.
Yeah, it's really a love letter to the original, and like this game changed a lot of us, changed our studio, changed our brand. So it's again a privilege to bring it back, but now 2026 to modern standard with some extra bits of story, extra bit of world. It's really a great adventure.
That must be such a fantastic experience for you, Joel, to go from being a super fan who, Black Flag is something that inspired your interest in getting into a career in this, and now you're working on rebuilding, remaking the game that first caused your passion for this. That must be, again, a lot of responsibility, but also such a sense of achievement of where you've come to.
Absolutely. And I really, every once in a while, even when we were replaying the original game again and then playing the first versions of what we were working on the remake, I would continuously have those sort of either moments of deja vu or sort of unlock, some neurons would spark that haven't fired in a decade and remember the wow factor of playing the game for the first time. And
yeah, I really hope that fun story when we presented the game, like the earlier version, what we call first playable, to Paris. So we flew to Paris, and then I went to see my family. So I went to train station wearing the same T-shirt, and someone hailed me in the train station. Is like, "Hey, what's your favorite Assassin's Creed?" I'm like, and it's like a Black Flag. Like, me too. And like your T-shirt, and start talking about it for a long time. And at the time, I couldn't tell this person like, "Are you? You are going to be really excited." But I do hope today, random stranger I met in the train station in France, that you are happy.
I'm sure they are. That's incredible self-restraint as well. Not to say, well, actually, and now you mention it.
Yeah.
And what was the decision behind removing the modern day sequences from the game? Is that a narrative choice, Joel?
I would honestly, the way I would put it is, it's not so much that we remove the modern day sequences. It's, again, we're in a different context now. So the simulation of Edward Kenway and the simulation of the golden age of piracy in Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag sat in a certain time and place in terms of the modern day story at that time. And so now the way we've envisioned doing this remake is that this remake is somebody else going into that same simulation and that same world. And maybe they see some new things when they're in there, even though it is still Edward Kenway's memories. And when they're not in there, what the story would be is fundamentally going to be different. It has to be, because it's a different character in a different context. And so all the stuff that happened in the modern day of the original Black Flag in the Abstergo offices that many people will remember, that is still canon in the lore, and that is still part of the story of Assassin's Creed. And what you're going to find in our game, where the modern day content is mostly found in new rifts, as well as many other things that you'll find, smaller things that you'll find in the world, that is also canon, but it is new canon. So in some sense, the original Black Flag and Black Flag Resynced are two different events in the lore of Assassin's Creed. And so for us, it just made sense to approach it that way. And so that's what we did.
How much attention do you have to pay to the potential fighting style of a pirate in the 18th century? The weapons that they're using, cutlasses and pistols, in Resynced, you can use human shields when people are shooting at you and things like that.
I think it's the part where history become really great source of inspiration. Like, we are looking at the weapon, especially the sword, at the time, and mainland weapon were kind of different from the weapon you will find on ship, because like situation will change when you do like more close quarter combat. When you are fighting below the deck, like your weapon, like that's why we have the more curved weapon, like cutlasses and like shorter and all. But we also really wanted the rapier that is like so iconic of the time, and that go with all of the dual fantasies that go with it. And it demonstrates something, one, look way more sophisticated, which is a great way to portray the bad guys, that they have a different way of fighting. Again, we come back with how pirates don't play fair. They adapt their weaponry. Like, that's why they have so many guns. Again, like, we don't want you to spend, I don't know, like 20, 30, 1 minute to reload the gun. And that's why Edward can have up to 4 guns, because it's just faster to, instead of reloading, I throw this gun, I get another one. So all of this inspired us to make actual system. And in the end, for example, you will fight differently with a rapier that is more precise, and can pierce this new mechanic of defense that we introduced, versus a cutlass that also allow you to strike multiple guards. So taking all of these bits of history, we transform it into gameplay system that are cool. Like, again, the gun, we have just, you don't just throw the gun, you do it in a very stylish, like gun kata kind of way. And again, yeah, it allows us to take something, make it into a cool way of playing the game.
Is there something that you each feel, maybe starting with you, Joel, is there something that you feel you've learnt from this game? And that might be, it might be a bit of history, it might be from a development perspective, it might be something that you thought about doing and decided not to. Was there one thing that you will really take away from this project?
Yeah, there's so many things, but if I boil it down, it was unique. It was a very unique experience, because it was so much, in so many ways, a kind of, if I was a screenwriter, this is like the equivalent of an adaptation, you know what I mean? So it's very different than most of the other AC games that I've worked on, and other games in general, where we can sort of dream up any story, we can change the tone however we want. If something's not working, if it's not jiving with history, or it's not jiving with something else about the game, we are at full freedom to change it. On this project, actually, we have less levers to change certain things, because certain things are already set in stone and beloved, rightfully. And so that means that we have to kind of play in a narrower space and find solutions and find ways of adapting certain things in their own unique way. And so this sort of exercise in like trying to elevate something that is already awesome is something new. That was something I'd never done in my career. And it was something that was like a unique challenge.
Yeah, I think that's what I feel as well. The first time like leading a project as a director, I always thought like, oh, the moment I'm director, I'm going to do that. Like I can, the sky is the limit. But actually setting strong boundary first is really great. And the freedom you have still within the box is still there. And it changes the way you think. And you still have, again, freedom to go a bit outside the box, but the way where you don't betray the original vision, but you still bring new things. So it's been a very good, gratifying challenge to get this really strong box where like everything is so great, but still manage to say, hey, but if I push a bit there, this feels better. And I think having the strong vision well-defined from the start, it's really, really something very important, and that was actually much more appreciated than I thought it would be.
If resyncing games has worked really well, it's worked for Black Flag, and it looks fantastic. Is this something that Ubisoft might think about for other games? Are there other games that could get a resynced treatment?
I mean, I'm quite certain that there are other games that could. Whether or not they will, I guess, remains to be seen. But, we're obviously going to look at the reception of this game and see what people think, but I don't think there's anything that precludes it. The great thing about the brand is that, like we mentioned, the fantasy of going into the Animus and visiting these memories and these simulations, that's an evergreen topic, and there's nothing that stops you within the lore of Assassin's Creed from going back to a memory you've been to before.
And then can we end on our quick fire questions? I'm going to start with Joel and then Julien for each of these. So Joel, who's your favorite character in the game?
I mean, aside from Edward, I would say Steed Bonnet. Love that guy.
I think Steed is a all favorite. Yeah, I really love the last message he gave to Edward. I was crying the first time I hear it. It is just so wholesome in this world that is full of wonder but also darkness. Oh, Steed, sorry. It was supposed to be short.
No, that's absolutely fine. That was a beautiful answer. I love it. No, it's great. And do you have a favorite viewpoint or location that you would like players to go and see, Joel?
I'm always, I think, as I mentioned before, I'm partial to Kingston, but I'm also specifically partial to the Port Royal prison location, which is an interesting area and something that's quite unique.
I'm biased, but if I was not biased, I would say probably Nassau. It's such a different town than the other, and it has its own mood, so yeah.
Have you got a favorite mission?
I love the early game when Edward is essentially pretending to be a Templar, or excuse me, he's pretending to be an assassin, but he's not one yet. And that assassin was also a Templar, so spoilers for your first parts of the game. But there's something just so fun and illuminating about who he is as a character as he was pretending to be someone else. And I always really love that part of the game, and I still kind of get a laugh out of it every time we play it.
I don't want to give spoiler, but you discover a location attached to the really origin of the lore. And I'm a big Assassin's Creed lore fan, so all of the tied to the first civilization, I really love how we portray this. So not saying the name, but people will know.
There you go. You're going to have to go and play it and find out. Have you got a favorite detail in the game? No matter how tiny, that you would want players to just take a minute and spot?
Another one for me, it's in the early game and it's Steed Bonnet related, but again, it makes me laugh every time, which is as they're pulling up to Havana, he's waving and Edward says something along the lines like, "Oh, do you see someone you know?" And he's like, no, I just want to make sure we're getting off to the right foot, that kind of thing. And Edward's like, "Oh, flash rogue like yourself, you wouldn't want to be," I forget what exactly he says. You wouldn't want to be misinterpreted, essentially.
Oh, yes. But Steed has all of these small quirks, like the way he wash his hand after he shake his hand to Edward is just hilarious.
But the one that I love is, so he says Edward says the flash rogue line, and just, Steed is just waving and he just makes this sound, which is like, yeah.
I shouldn't want to be mistaken for a pirate again.
Right. Flash rogue like yourself must be cautious.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like a acknowledgement that's like this weird noise that he makes, and it just makes me laugh every time.
For me, is how salted the salt pork is, which I have to mention because it's been a long discussion with the artist. But getting the food right and getting the feel of what it was at the time, that was a bit tough. So salted pork was a way to keep the food the same way like the biscuit. We had an issue where I think someone added chocolate chip into the sheep biscuit. No, sheep biscuit wasn't a pleasant food. So we try to show this, and sometimes again, like because you cannot smell, you cannot touch, to make the salted pork feel salty, we had to put some very obvious salt on it, which was a quite fun direction to give to the artist. Make it look salty.
More salt. And is there something in the game that each of you think a player might miss that you would really want to make sure that they pick up or they go back and find?
Oh, there's so many things. Well, I'm on a theme though, which is we do have a new quest line that surrounds the sort of the final days of Stede Bonnet. What was really the true story of the end of his story. And so that's a new part to Resynced that wasn't in the original Black Flag. And so I really hope that players go out of their way to discover that one and really find out the truth.
Yeah, but I think all of the side content now is also highlighted with a lot of new quests, so that I'm sure the new player, the returning player, won't miss it. But takes the time to explore underwater, Smuggler Cave and the shipwreck. They really look amazing. There is a lot of work that has been done on them. So yeah, to explore each of them, they all have their personalities, their story, and they are all equally amazing.
And go and look at some bottle labels for Julien as well. This has been an absolutely fascinating discussion. I've really enjoyed getting to the roots of how you address taking a fan favourite and trying to tweak it and make it better and fitting for the world of 2026 without breaking the things that everybody loved about it. It sounds like you guys really enjoyed working on this. There's a great team behind all of these things. So congratulations on getting the game out there. And I hope that fans will love it as much as they love the original. Thank you very, very much, Joel and Julien.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for joining me as we explored the real history that's inspired Assassin's Creed. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and share it with your friends and subscribe to keep up with the latest episodes of Echoes of History.